G'day, my name's Dev. I'm here on Larrakia country in Darwin at the top end of Australia's Northern Territory. This series of short stories will explore what Australia is and how it came to be, so that you can learn about its unique metamorphosis through time. Australia is a vast country at the very edge of the world. Its geological record is ancient. For hundreds of millions of years it was formed and then reformed and then eroded to create the great expanse of its primordial landscapes today. Its separation from Gondwanaland isolated it geographically from the rest of the world. This exceptionalised its ecology and supported the conservationism and esotericism of the first Australians, which connected them economically and spiritually to their country. Long before the nation-states of Europe existed, the first Australians had settled their continent and developed their own states, hundreds of them, based off the complete use of their lands. We will never know how permanent their boundaries were in prehistoric times, but they were sanctified by traditions long before the Europeans ever dreamt of Australia. And dream they did. Australia was first hypothesised by the great Western philosopher Aristotle as Terra Australis Incognita, an enormous southern continent to balance the rest of the world. The size and shape of its far north coast was speculated by Marco Polo and then imagined by European geographers for centuries after that. Northern Australia has a mysterious history. At its centre is Arnhem Land, which is one of the most culturally and ecologically important parts of the continent. It is also close to Asia. The Yolngu people of its northeast have a fascinating legend of an ancient group of visitors they call the Bajini. According to this legend, the Bajini sailed with their families long ago from the directions of Indonesia. They were bronze-skinned, wore sarongs and planted rice. This legend is indicative of the fabled history along Australia's far northern coastline of contact between saltwater Aboriginal societies and different groups of enterprising foreigners. According to the legend, the Bajini flew flags banded with blue and red stripes, possibly British, but earlier Islamic and European elements of North Australian contact are also present. A moon-dwelling deity called Allah, and men striding ashore dressed in mirrors or armour, perhaps Portuguese or Dutch explorers. The North Australian coast was possibly visited by Arabian traders, Chinese junks and Spanish galleons, and even raided by Portuguese slavers, but they were all secretive mobs, and so there has been no hard evidence discovered yet today which links any of them directly to Australia. But the first with any certainty are the Dutch. From their Indonesian colonies, the directors of their mighty international East India Company sent their ships to see if there were markets to exploit here, but there were none. The first Australians had no use for the gold or silver, nor the spices which drove Holland's global commercial empire. A seafaring people from the islands of Indonesia came next. They are known as the Macassans, and for 2 centuries they sailed every year on the monsoonal winds to northern Australia in search of trepang. They called northern Australia Marege, or the wild country, and their visits had a significant effect on the languages and cultures of the coastal Aboriginal peoples they encountered. The French sent their navigators to observe Australia, but it was the British and the scientists they sent aboard their ships who were the first of this long line of alien visitors to really appreciate Australia's equitable worth. Their reports were optimistic but completely disregarded the first Australians. This influenced British policymakers to send their country's most vulnerable people to the 18th century equivalent of deep space, Sydney Cove. What followed was Australia's colonial expansion. It was an ambitious, dangerous and largely agricultural process which spread apocalyptically across the south and then the north of the continent throughout the 19th and then into the 20th century. It was a societal disaster for almost every Indigenous group it encountered. It was also an environmental disaster for large areas of the continent. It is very much a story of paradise gained and paradise lost. But it became modern Australia, which is a materially successful democratic nation. Its population is multicultural and enjoys one of the highest standards of living in the world. To the uninitiated, and in a global context, Australia seems an idyllic place. But there is poverty and racism here, environmental degradation, and there are culture wars. Like other Western nations, Australia is haunted by its past. And rightly so. Some terrible things have happened here, but such is the history of the world. But when triangulated against it, Australia is the consequence of an extraordinary series of events. So I created this series of stories to explore the most fascinating parts of Australia's history so that you can learn about its unique metamorphosis through time. Thanks for watching. If you're interested, then please hit the like and subscribe buttons. For the next episode, I'm going to discuss the exceptional story of the traditional Aboriginal owners of this continent, the first Australians. Cheers.